When I was 14, my stepfather took over our house, and our lives. He controlled everything. My mother, my voice, my future. But I came back. And I made sure he lost everything. I should have known that the man my mom brought home would be the start of something dark. You ever get that gut feeling? The kind that doesn't scream, but whispers, slow, deliberate, something's wrong here. Yeah, that was him, Carl. I was 14 when he moved in. Quiet town, middle of nowhere type stuff, the kind of place where everyone waves at each other in traffic but talks behind closed curtains. My dad had died 2 years earlier in a freak construction accident. One moment, I had a father who taught me how to fish and change spark plugs, and the next, I had silence. The kind that stretches across dinner tables and settles into your chest. Mom didn't take it well. She tried to keep up appearances, smiling at PTA meetings, making pancakes on Sundays, but she was unraveling. When she met Carl, she needed someone, anyone, to fill the void. And Carl, he was charming, said the right things, had that easy smile and a handyman streak that made him seem like he could fix anything, but he couldn't fix me. And he didn't want to. The first year was tolerable. Carl kept his distance from me, tried to bond by handing me tools and telling me to hold the flashlight steady. We weren't close, but I figured maybe time would smooth it out. I was wrong. By the time I was 16, things had changed. He started pushing boundaries, small things at first, criticizing how I dressed, rolling his eyes when I spoke, making offhand comments about how I'd never be a real man, without someone like him to shape me. Mom didn't see it. Or maybe she didn't want to. She was working 2 jobs, exhausted all the time. When she was around, Carl put on the nice guy act. But when she wasn't, he let the mask slip. He'd drink. Not heavily. Just enough to blur the lines. He'd get meaner. He'd start throwing his weight around, sometimes literally. Once, he pushed me into a wall because I didn't mow the lawn the way he liked. Told me if I ever laid a hand on him, he'd press charges and make sure I ended up in juvie. I remember staring at him, heart pounding, fists clenched, and thinking, this man thinks he owns me. And maybe for a while, he did. He chipped away at me. Piece by piece. Took my confidence, my space, my voice. I stopped inviting friends over. I spent more time in the garage with my headphones on, pretending I didn't exist. When I turned 18, I left for college out of state. I didn't look back. I didn't come home for the holidays. Didn't answer calls unless it was Mom. Carl's presence lingered in my memories like smoke from a fire that never quite goes out. But the story doesn't end there. It starts again 6 years later. I was 24, working as an IT tech in a city 3 hours away. Life was stable, quiet, until Mom called, voice trembling. It's Carl, she said. He's in trouble. I almost hung up. But she was crying. And for all her flaws, my mom had never hurt me. Not like he did. She asked if I could come home for a few days. Just to help sort things out. I agreed. Reluctantly. Carl had gotten into some legal mess. Turns out, he'd taken out loans in Mom's name. Credit cards, store accounts, maxed out. They were facing foreclosure. Mom had no idea. She trusted him with everything. And Carl, he played dumb, said it was a misunderstanding, that he'd fix it. I stayed in my old room, mostly untouched, like a museum of who I used to be. That week, I dug into the paperwork. The debts, the patterns, the lies. Carl wasn't just reckless, he was a manipulator. A fraud. And in that moment, something snapped back into place inside me. That feeling I used to have, of being small, powerless, voiceless, it burned away. I was a grown man now. And I was going to burn him down. The first thing I did was make copies. Of everything. Credit statements, forged signatures, loan documents, every last shred of proof that Carl had been playing my mother like a damn fiddle. I set up a secure drive, password protected, uploaded the files, and even made a few hard copies for good measure. I wasn't about to let this weasel bury the evidence. Then I played nice. I smiled at dinner, helped Carl fix the leaky sink, nodded when he droned on about how hard life had been lately. I listened, took mental notes, Let him think I was just the dutiful son coming back to help out. But behind that smile, I was sharpening the knife. I reached out to an old friend from high school, Marcus, now a junior lawyer working in town. I told him everything, showed him the documents. He looked stunned at first, then impressed. "Jesus, man," he said. "You've got enough here to bury him." "Good," I said. "That's the plan." We mapped out our options. Financial fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, since Mom's name had been used repeatedly without consent. Marcus even knew someone at the local paper, a woman who loved a good scandal, especially when it involved betrayal and money. I wasn't just thinking about legal payback. I wanted public shame. I wanted Carl to feel what it was like to be exposed. Powerless, like he made me feel for years. Over the next 2 weeks, I laid the groundwork. Helped Mom reorganize her accounts, opened a private one in her name that Carl couldn't touch. I had her sign a power of attorney document giving me limited control over her finances, just in case. She was hesitant at first, still trying to believe the man she married wasn't a monster, but after I showed her the truth, she signed. Carl didn't know it, but the ground was already shifting beneath him. He thought he was playing the same game. Thought he could gaslight, charm, and manipulate his way out of it. But he was playing poker with a man holding all the cards, and I was about to call his bluff. Carl started to feel the pressure, slowly, at first. His credit cards began bouncing. The joint accounts, empty. I made sure of it. Every penny my mom had left was moved to safety. He couldn't even buy himself a 6-pack without checking over his shoulder. He started snapping at her more, and I could see the cracks forming. She was waking up, finally seeing the man behind the smile. One night at dinner, he lost it over something stupid. I think she put too much salt on the potatoes. He slammed his fist on the table, cursed at her. Old me might have flinched. But now, I calmly stood up, looked him in the eye, and said, "Don't talk to her like that. Ever again." He blinked, stunned. Probably the first time I'd ever pushed back. He muttered something under his breath and stormed off. That's when I saw it in my mom's face. Confusion, fear, but also relief. Like she knew something had shifted. Meanwhile, Marcus and I built the legal net. We reported the fraud anonymously to the bank and credit agencies. Planted the seeds. Called in a few favors to get the paperwork processed quickly. Carl thought he was the spider, weaving his web. He didn't realize he'd already been wrapped and tagged. One night, I, accidentally, left a folder on the kitchen table, open, just enough so Carl could see it. Financial records, copies of the loans, dates, transactions. He saw it. He didn't say anything, but I watched him read every line. Watched the blood drain from his face. The next morning, he tried to sweet-talk me. Asked if I wanted to go grab a beer. I almost laughed. "I'm good," I said. "Maybe focus on fixing your mess first." He didn't smile after that. That weekend, I ran into an old teacher of mine, Mr. Leary, at the grocery store. He asked how I was doing, what I was up to back in town. I told him, without going into detail. He said something that stuck with me. "You always had a fire in you, kid. Just needed the right reason to let it burn." Well, Carl gave me a reason. And I wasn't done. The next domino was public exposure. I was planning it carefully. A leak here, a document there, an anonymous tip to the local journalist Marcus had connected me with. The kind of slow burn story that starts as a whisper and ends as a full-blown explosion. Carl had no idea what was coming. But soon, everyone else would. Carl was unraveling. Slowly, desperately, like a man trying to patch a sinking boat with duct tape and denial. The bank called one morning while he was in the shower. I answered. "Hello, this is First National calling about account discrepancies under the name Carl Jameson. Is he available?" I smiled. "He's in the shower," I said, "but I can have him call you back." "What's this in regard to?" "Unusual activity on multiple accounts. Several flagged transactions, some suspected to be fraudulent." "Wow, sounds serious," I said, and scribbled down the number, though I already had it. "I'll make sure he gets it." When I passed the message along, Carl went pale. He tried to play it cool, made some excuse about needing to call an old business partner. I watched him sweat through a lie he wasn't prepared to tell. Mom started asking more questions. Why are we getting calls about money we don't have? She asked one night, brow furrowed. You said everything was handled. Carl waved her off. Just confusion with the accounts. Banks are always screwing something up. But she didn't look convinced anymore. That night, she came to my room, quiet, anxious. Ben, what's going on? I didn't lie. I told her everything. Showed her the copies of the documents, the debt in her name, the forged signatures. She cried. Not loud, not messy, just silent tears down her cheeks as she stared at the proof. He did this to me. I nodded. To both of us. Her hands trembled as she folded the papers back up. What do we do now? I looked her dead in the eye. We end it. That night changed something in her. She stopped defending him, stopped hesitating, started paying attention. Meanwhile, the journalist Marcus had connected me with Erica, started making calls. She was good, asked the right questions, knew exactly where to dig. Within days, she had uncovered even more. Unpaid taxes, old debt collectors, a string of bounced checks stretching back years. Carl was a professional parasite. And now he was surrounded. The moment it all truly collapsed came on a Tuesday. Carl was on the porch when a man in a gray suit walked up with a clipboard and a badge. IRS. They spoke for maybe 10 minutes. I couldn't hear much, but I saw the color drain from Carl's face, saw the man hand him a thick envelope, saw Carl stagger back into the house like he'd been gut-punched. I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. That night, I found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at the envelope. No beer, no smug look, just silence. He looked up at me, defeated. What are you doing to me? He asked, voice hoarse. I stared at him, calm. Nothing you didn't do to yourself. He blinked, slow. I gave this family everything. No, I said, you took everything, and now you're getting the bill. He tried to stand, to muster some of that old alpha energy, but it was gone. The man who once threw his weight around like he was king of the house, now couldn't even lift his pride. He left the next morning. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't take much, just stuffed a duffel bag, muttered something to Mom about needing space, and drove off. He didn't know the sheriff's department had already received the case files. That Erica's article was going live the next day. That his name was about to be printed on every mailbox in town next to the words, fraud, abuse of trust, and, under investigation. Carl thought leaving was escape. But I knew better. It was just the beginning of his freefall. And I was the one who cut the rope. The article hit the town like a thunderclap. Front page. Full color. Headline. Local contractor under investigation for financial fraud and identity theft. Right there beneath it, a photo of Carl, arms crossed, standing next to his old company truck. The same smug smile he used to wear like a crown. Gone in an instant. The story was brutal. Erica didn't hold back. She laid out everything. The loans, the fake accounts, the forged signatures, the IRS involvement. She quoted anonymous sources, me, of course, who painted Carl as controlling, manipulative, and financially abusive. People talked. Neighbors, former clients. A few came forward with stories of their own. Unfinished work, overcharged invoices, lost deposits. Turns out, Carl's whole business had been a pyramid of BS, and now the walls were caving in. His phone lit up non-stop, calls he didn't answer, messages he ignored. But I read the panic in his eyes when he checked his voicemail. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts he'd forgotten he created. And then came the backlash. He showed up at a gas station, and the clerk, a kid I used to tutor back in high school, refused to serve him. We don't help thieves here, he said. He tried going to his old job site and found the gate locked. Until further notice, the sign read. His world was shrinking fast. Every door closing, every bridge burned. Mom didn't cry anymore. She got quiet, focused, like someone finally ready to clean up a mess they didn't make. She hired a real accountant, talked to the bank, filed paperwork. We spent 2 straight weekends entangling the web Carl had spun. And me. I watched. I watched Carl squirm, watched him pace the porch, light cigarette after cigarette with shaky hands. I watched the man who once towered over me now jump at the sound of a car door slamming down the street. One night, I caught him sitting in the garage, head in his hands. He didn't hear me come in. Just sat there, whispering to himself. I didn't mean to lose everything, he mumbled. I just wanted control. That word hit me like a slap. Control. That's what it had always been about. Not love, not family, not loyalty. Just power. That's what he had stolen from me as a teenager, the right to feel safe in my own home, to speak freely, to be heard without fear. And now, he had nothing. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy knocked on the door with a formal request for Carl to appear for questioning. He wasn't under arrest yet, but they made it clear. The investigation was real, and it was serious. Carl tried to laugh it off, called it nonsense, but I saw his hand shaking as he signed the notice. By the end of the week, he was gone. Packed up whatever dignity he had left, shoved it in the back of a dented pickup, and peeled out of the driveway without a word. No apology. No goodbye. Just silence. And for the first time since I was 14, the house felt clean. Lighter. Free. Mom and I stood on the porch, watching the dust settle. She looked at me. Do you think he'll come back? I shrugged. If he does, he won't find what he left. She nodded. And for the first time in a long, long time, she smiled. Carl was gone. But the damage he left behind didn't pack itself up with his duffel bag. It clung to the corners of the house like dust. In the paperwork, the finances, the silence between me and my mom at breakfast. We weren't broken anymore, but we were bruised. And bruises take time. That week, I helped Mom do everything Carl never did. We met with the credit union, filed identity theft reports, signed affidavits. I sat beside her in office after office as we repeated the story over and over again. She apologized more than once. I should have seen it, she said. I should have protected you. You were surviving, I told her. That's enough. We cleaned the house. Not just vacuum and mop kind of cleaning. Real cleaning. Stripping it down. We boxed up everything Carl had touched. Photos, tools, clothes. His boots went in the trash. His recliner got tossed to the curb. It felt therapeutic. Like we were exorcising a ghost. One afternoon, I found a locked metal box buried in the back of the closet. Mom didn't even know it was there. Inside, receipts, old checks, notes scribbled in shorthand, a second cell phone. That burner phone. Let's just say it had messages Carl wouldn't want anyone reading. Conversations with women. Screenshots of payments he made using cards that weren't his. Photos of documents he shouldn't have had. We gave it all to Marcus. He handed it straight to the investigators. That sealed the deal. Official charges were filed. The case shifted from review to active. A court date was set. Carl was still off the grid, but the law had his scent now. And this time, no charm or manipulation would save him. Mom changed, too. She stood straighter. Spoke louder. Smiled more. Not the forced smile she used to wear for PTA meetings, but something real. Something earned. One morning, she knocked on my door and said, I'm applying for a new job. Something full-time. Benefits. Retirement. I want to stand on my own again. I just nodded, proud in a way that didn't need words. As for me, I stayed a few extra weeks. Helped her repaint the living room. Fix the plumbing Carl had half-assed. We laughed for the first time in what felt like years. And late at night, I sat on the porch alone and let the quiet settle in. For the first time, it didn't feel like suffocating silence. It felt like peace. But the story wasn't over yet. Because Carl still had to answer to the courts. And I wasn't about to miss that show. I didn't wear a suit. I wore the same gray button-down Carl once mocked me for. Said it made me look like a soft city boy. I wore it with pride. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered. Low ceilings, fluorescent lights, that familiar stale government air. Carl had been picked up 2 nights before, caught outside a cheap motel 2 counties over. He looked nothing like the man who used to puff his chest around the house, and shaven. Pale, nervous. When he walked in, cuffed and hunched like a question mark, our eyes met. And for the first time in my life, he looked away first. The hearing wasn't long, but it was enough. The prosecution laid it out. Financial fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, intent to defraud a vulnerable adult. The list was longer than I expected. Marcus told me they were aiming for a deal, but the state wanted prison time. Carl pled not guilty. Of course he did. But the judge didn't care about performance. He cared about paper, about evidence, and I had given them everything. I was called to testify. My palms were sweaty as I stood. But I looked Carl dead in the eye as I told the court what he did. Not just the loans, the lies, but the control, the threats, the fear. I made sure they saw the whole man. Not just the fraud, but the coward underneath. When I stepped down, I didn't sit with the spectators. I sat next to my mom. Her hand found mine. Carl's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, financial stress, emotional hardship. But the judge wasn't moved. He scheduled a sentencing hearing. Until then, Carl would remain in custody. No bail. I'll never forget the look on his face when the cuffs clicked back around his wrists. Pure panic, like he was finally realizing this wasn't a dream. No escape, no deal, no more control. As he was escorted out, he turned to us. I thought maybe he'd shout something. Deny it, beg, threaten. But all he said was, "This isn't over." I stood, took one slow step forward. "No," I said, voice steady. "It is." He stared at me for a second. Then they pulled him away. And just like that, the man who once filled our house with fear was gone. This time, for good. Carl was gone. Not just from our house, but from our lives. The courtroom, the cuffs, the panic in his eyes, those moments were burned into my memory. But after the silence settled, the real question remained: what now? Justice, even when it's delivered cleanly, doesn't come with instructions for what to feel afterward. For a few days, it felt surreal. I'd wake up expecting to hear the slam of the front door, the grumble of Carl's voice echoing down the hallway. But there was only quiet. A soft kind of peace that felt foreign, like wearing a jacket that didn't belong to me yet. And then came the guilt. Not for what I did, not even for how far I went. But for how much of my identity had become wrapped up in revenge. I had spent so long imagining this moment, planning it, executing it. I forgot what it meant to just exist without a target. Mom filled her time with structure. She got the new job. Started walking every morning. She joined a local community group, started attending weekend book clubs, things she never did before. Things Carl never let her have time for. She smiled more. Not wide, not flashy, but real. We started cooking dinner together. At first, it was awkward, both of us feeling like strangers in a house that used to be a battlefield. But then one night, she told a joke. A dumb one, and I laughed, and just like that, something cracked open. I stuck around longer than I planned. I told myself I was helping with loose ends, the final paperwork, clearing the debt Carl left behind. But deep down, I think I just wanted to see what life looked like when the poison had finally drained from the wound. One afternoon, we painted the kitchen. Just the two of us. Nothing fancy, off-white with a hint of yellow. Bright, clean, and as we worked, music playing from an old speaker. Mom said quietly, "It feels like this house can breathe again." I didn't reply. I just kept painting. But I felt it too. Carl's sentencing hearing came a month later. We both went. This time, I wore a blazer. Clean shave. No fear. He looked worse than before. Thinner. Eyes sunken. A shell of the man who once controlled the room with nothing but presence. The judge read out the charges. The sentence. 6 years. Not the maximum, but not a slap on the wrist either. Enough time to feel it. Enough time to lose the power he used to cling to. Carl didn't look at us as they led him away. He didn't say a word. And that silence, that lack of last words, of control, of noise, felt louder than anything he could have said. Afterward, Mom and I didn't celebrate. There were no high fives or tears. Just a long walk through the park. Birds, wind, light cutting through the trees. "I feel like I've been asleep for a decade," she said. "Welcome back," I told her. And we meant it. That night, I stood out on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun go down. I thought about everything, the years I'd spent silent. The boy who had hidden in his room, afraid to speak. And I realized something. I'd won. But I had also grown. I was no longer the kid who needed to prove his worth to a bully in his own home. I was the man who protected his mother, the man who reclaimed his voice. And that meant something. Carl no longer lived in our house. Or in our heads. Or in our future. 2 months after the sentencing, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Carl. I stood in the kitchen holding it like it was radioactive. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Burn it. Pretend it never existed. But curiosity, or maybe closure, got the better of me. I opened it. Ben, you probably won't read this. But I needed to write it anyway. Not for you, for me. Already I hated it, the way he still made it about himself. The way he still thought his words mattered. I've had a lot of time to think in here. More than I ever wanted. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt your mom. I never meant to. I was angry. I was lost. I didn't know how to be a father, so I tried to be a ruler instead. And that destroyed everything. He went on. Page after page of half apologies. Deflections. Explanations that read more like excuses. But one line stuck with me. The truth is, I envied you. Your strength. Your bond with your mother. Your ability to see through my bullshit. I saw it as rebellion, but it was courage. I sat with that for a long time. Not because it forgave him. But because it finally admitted what I had always known. He was scared of me. Of the truth I carried. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. But I kept the letter. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. That even monsters can be made small. That even tyrants can lose. That the truth, when held long enough, cuts deeper than any blade. The following spring, I moved out of state. Took a promotion, rented a little house with a yard. On my first day off, I planted a tree out front. A maple, tall, strong, with roots that run deep. Mom came to visit a few months later. She brought pie and new curtains and smiled like someone who knew how to rebuild. We sat on the porch watching that tree, still young, swaying in the breeze. This place suits you, she said. Feels like home, I told her. And I meant it. Because home isn't about walls or who pays the bills. It's about safety. About peace. About knowing no one can walk through that door and make you feel small ever again. I don't think about Carl much anymore. When I do, it's in flashes, a face in a courtroom, a letter in a drawer. But that's all he is now. A shadow from a life I outgrew. And maybe that's the best revenge of all. Not watching him fall. But rising so far above him, he can't even see me anymore.